We can get started. Yeah. All right. Hello and welcome to this interesting discussion about Clarity, feature parity. In case you're wondering if that's going to happen, not happen, what happens afterwards, we're going to talk all the juicy details here. Before we get started, quick round of introductions. I'm Sarala. I'm Director of Engineering at Hiro Systems, where we build developer tools and all things developer experience for the decentralized web via stacks. So, all right, so let's do a quick round of introductions. Let's start with you, Laszlo. What do you do?
Dakai, my company, is an innovation partner for large companies, governments. We built or we contributed to things like the Chivo wallet in El Salvador. We work with Binance and other large companies, Spotify, Google. So we are really tied into those, but we also like to work with startups, and we're really involved in crypto right now, as well as some other emerging fields, and we hope to make a difference in all of these.
It's very interesting. Interested to learn more about that. Marvin?
Yeah, I'm Marvin, tech lead at Stacks Foundation. You might have seen me before, anything related to Clarity, so Clarity Universe, educational programs, assisting the accelerator teams on their architectural decisions with Clarity. So basically anything revolving around smart contracts, that's what I've been doing.
Awesome. Okay, so feature parity. I think Clarity is one tool that would enable Bitcoin match up with all the other blockchains out there and bridge the gap and unlock a lot of features. So before we dive into that details, I would love to hear your hot take on whether that feature parity is possible or not, whether it's via Clarity, is that an option? So start with you, Laszlo.
I think in many ways, Clarity is already a good tool for specific things. What I'm seeing is a bit biased, obviously, to the enterprise side. In many cases that we have seen, when you need real-time things, it's not yet there. But when it comes to enterprise, sometimes it can enable transactions that would have been months for the industry, now in minutes, and that's amazing, I think. And since it's Bitcoin based, many of the enterprises, many of the government entities, they are opening up to it, and Bitcoin in general. And I think Stacks is in the right place to enable that right now.
That's amazing. Marvin, so I'll leave it to you. I will ask you to play the devil's advocate. Do you think that feature parity is possible?
You know, it's a tough question to answer. So when you look at it, of course, like we have to consider like the true Bitcoin DeFi, right? If we're talking about that will require change on the consensus level of Bitcoin. So that's obviously not going to happen, and that's also not what we want. So that's why there's these different projects like Stacks and a few others that are trying to bridge that gap and trying to get there, and we have to get there in steps. So yeah, looking at how far Stacks has progressed than before, when it was block stack and when it was just names on Bitcoin. So these incremental changes, you know, we've seen going from having none of that to quite a bit of it, and having all these projects that are being built right now, right? Like Stacks 2 is not that old, and suddenly we have these expressive smart contracts that already unlock a lot of these things, right. Can have triggers based on something that happens on Bitcoin, right? But there's still a long way to go. So is it possible? I assume so, I hope so, but it's a tough thing to get to.
It's interesting you put it that way. Yesterday we spoke in detail about Clarity and the strengths of it, because it's so different from other languages out there in the ecosystem and other ecosystems specifically, and how that is working towards our strength for Bitcoin and Stacks in general. And before we dive into a little bit more on what we're doing about bridging that gap, what's happening right now in the ecosystem, you know, step one after knowing and getting introduced to Clarity is really the tooling. So enabling developers to write those tools and making it easy for them and improving the developer experience. So to that account, one tool definitely comes to mind, which is Clarinet, which is a CLI tool that we've been working on. Very powerful features. We just introduced an inline debugger feature that's going to going to make all the developers' lives very simple and easier. It also comes with a VS Code plugin. Probably Q2, we will see an inline debugger for that as well. There's also Orchestra, which is going to be a part of Clarinet, and I know you are very close to the developer tooling and writing contracts, so that'll be very useful for you. Yeah, so let's dive into what's happening in the ecosystem, what are the various projects that are bridging that gap and enabling that feature parity. Start with you.
Yeah, I think backtracking a bit, Solidity has years of advantage to its side. I mean, Solidity is the biggest competitor to Clarity, as far as I know, and so it's a difficult ride. For now, when a developer jumps into the Stacks ecosystem, for them, it makes sense from the business side, from the development side, and they can learn the language and pick it up. But when they actually start creating a project, writing code, that's very different than just learning the basics.
Yeah.
And so I think it's enabling enabling that with tools like Clarinet is going to be very powerful. And I would encourage anyone here who is a developer, if they want to help the ecosystem the most, I think creating these tools for Stacks, that's going to move the needle a lot because that's going to enable more and more developers to jump on this. Now back to the original question, I think well, there are a couple of tools that are missing, but I think that the parity will be there soon. Probably in a year or two, we will. Right now, it's a very hot space, and as soon as something gets this, something starts to grow at this pace, developers will just put the experience behind that.
Awesome. How about you, Marvin? Do you know about some important things that are happening?
I was just thinking, like tooling is of course very important, and I was a huge proponent of that as well. And seeing projects like Clarinet and now Orchestra that Ludo just showed me as well is very impressive, and also just at the speed at which these tools are being built and released and these new features added. I think it's very cool. But I like to go back to when Stacks 2 was just launched, and there were already teams building on Stacks without it even being launched. So they were really at the forefront of this, and some accelerated teams that were in very early, they didn't really have the same access to those tools, or the tools were a bit more, say, rudimentary.
Yeah.
So lots of respect to them for basically like building this and debugging as they would go along the way, and some projects that come to mind for me that were immediately leveraging a lot of the unique properties of not just Clarity, but also Stacks, right? Arcadeco was one of the first ones, self-repaying loans that would utilize the consensus mechanism, proof of transfer. Alex came shortly thereafter as well, and they're doing all sorts of things. Like their repertoire is so big, we just saw them on stage. They have all sorts of lending products, they have a swap, they're building on all sorts of other things as well. So lots of DeFi that's being brought on. And now these tokens like, say, Wrap Bitcoin, like XBTC that we saw earlier, is starting to unlock that Bitcoin potential in these things, where you can suddenly do Bitcoin like DeFi with Alex or with these other protocols. So that's very exciting, and that was so quick, right? It's so fast since I've been built. So
I'm really excited about all the things that are happening around Bitcoin DeFi. And we've heard so much about Bitcoin DeFi in the past couple of days, as well yesterday and today. So really excited to see where that goes. And it's not that whether that will happen, we need to make that happen. And I think Clarity is the way to bridge that gap as well. So before I go on to the next question, I want to give a huge shout out to Bryce and Ludo from Hiro, who made that Clarinet and Orchestra features and additional stuff happen. So if you're watching, hello. So my next question to you, Laszlo, would be, let's say we have all this tooling, all these interesting projects happening in our ecosystem, and we achieve that feature parity with other blockchains that are out there. So what would that unlock for us? What are some interesting use cases that you are probably thinking about without giving away too much about your innovative ideas? But what are some things that we could unlock as a result?
Absolutely, yeah. I think what we have seen, we talk to these large companies, and whenever we mention blockchain, the first thing that comes to their mind with blockchain applications is Ethereum-based things. and they are not really happy about that. It's difficult to roll the discussion along. So a few years ago, it was almost impossible to talk about these things. You couldn't go into a boardroom and talk to executives about the blockchain.
Yeah.
They heard about it, they researched, but they didn't really want to touch it. And everyone remembers ICOs, or I mean, it has been a long time ago. Maybe there are some new people who haven't been there when ICOs were around. These things kind of destroyed the image, these quick money grab schemes of other blockchains. But throughout this, Bitcoin stayed. And what has been really valuable is that people could invest in Bitcoin and saw that their money grew. And so more and more people invested. And from there, they took out some of their money, they played around with DeFi, they played around with different protocols, and that kind of moved the ecosystem. I think one of the things that we definitely see is supply chain tracking, like paying out whenever some action happens automatically between different parties. You might have 5, 6, 7 companies, regulators involved in one transaction. That's in the end one flow of materials or anything else. And then it has been a very difficult issue, and it takes months currently to settle these bills. Stacks and Bitcoin can enable this to be automatic without the image of Ethereum and others. That's what I would say for now. But there are many interesting projects in the space that are coming up and that will get to the wider range of people, even if they don't know that blockchain has enabled that to be faster, to be better, to be quicker, to be more secure.
Yeah, thanks for that. So Marvin, what's your take on that? What could we unlock?
You know, like it remains to be seen. There's so much like untapped potential, unexplored territory on these things, but we're like inching closer to it, right? So you see new projects that are coming out that are also moving closer towards going to that native era, that area there. So you know, like Sassy Protocol is working on something like native Bitcoin loans. And there's going to be there's other projects that are working towards these similar kind of things, and I think that's just very interesting because there's a huge amount of capital locked up in Bitcoin, of course. So sort of tapping into that could explode the whole scene, right? The whole ecosystem. So it's going to be very interesting to see that once these projects come out, if we're going to see people that hold Bitcoin that have never really participated in these things before are suddenly like, hey, I can loan out my Bitcoin. You know, I'm interested in Bitcoin and I can loan out my Bitcoin and I'm going to get Bitcoin back plus interest, right? And that's what they care about. And that's these are the kind of things that this could unlock. So it's very interesting to see where that is going to take us.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I do think that this will definitely enable Bitcoin to survive the vampire attack, to say, not necessarily the zombie attack, a vampire attack. So really excited to see. I hope you have some interesting projects lined up and you're thinking about it in a way to achieve like the future, unlock more potential about stacks and Bitcoin. So my last question in wrapping up, really, if I could ask you to predict the most outrageous and implausibly great things that could happen once we achieve this feature parity, once we have all these exciting projects going on in our ecosystem, what do you predict could happen? Let me start with you.
Yeah, I think going back a bit to the previous point by Marvin, putting whole investment vehicles on Bitcoin and enabling different ways of earning money for people. I think we are not very far, so it's not that outrageous, but very significant. I think some other things, I mean, I would love to see a world where you kind of, you can just take your phone around with a wallet on it and you can authenticate to places with as much effort as just touching something and paying for those experiences. So not really needing to dwell into all these apps, connect them with your browser and all of these different, I mean, the experience right now is in its early stages. I think just having a seamless kind of flow maybe Apple or some other providers will enable that we can just go around, tap our phone, and get something at the bar, get something, get into a party or anything like that. And then on the other side, from the large corporation side, if they have an easy way to just open up parts of their data that's potentially data on us, on our life, and open up these privacy modules that have not been accessible, but now with the blockchain they can get a common API, and everyone can access their kind of data, the things that they care about, and data on others that others enable. And I remember Blockstack in the early days when I saw it. It was very easy to share these notes that you made, and it's kind of blurry, but data privacy was a big part of that. And I think these things, we are going to go back to the roots a bit in that regard, and be able to control our data and also access it simply, because even now there are hundreds of APIs to access your data, and you can download these zip files because of the European GDPR laws, but accessing that and actually using that and interacting with that is extremely difficult, even if you can do it. So I think the blockchain providing an interface for that is going to unlock a lot of things that are not possible today.
Interesting. If we look back a little bit on like the history of Stacks and seeing what it enabled at Stacks 2.0, and we've seen projects by like Feature where like he's an OG in the space. For those of you that don't know, like he made this thing called catamaran swap, where you can actually send in a Bitcoin transaction, so as a byte buffer into a Clarity smart contract, and verify if it's been mined, what has been sent to what address. So that unlocks a lot of very interesting things, because you can now send a Bitcoin transaction that triggers something on Stacks chain, so that triggers some sort of DeFi mechanism or something that happens in Clarity. So that's already very exciting, but I think one of the projects that I would say would be the holy grail is to go back the other way, right? So right now we can make stuff happen through Bitcoin, make something happen on Stacks, but what would be really amazing is, of course, if we can sort of bridge that read-only access that we have, and you can start something on Clarity, in Stacks, in Clarity, that then ends up on Bitcoin, right? So there's a lot of work that's been done on that. So Jeff sadly is not here on our panel today, but they've thought a lot about like, okay, how can we get this done? How can we bridge back to this? And they thought about numerous things. We don't have time to discuss it all, but one of the things is like tokenizing reward slots for proof of transfer. So that's pretty interesting. There's a few issues with that, because you don't know like exactly like what you're going to get and when you're going to get it, and that was blocked on Stacks 2 as well. But in Stacks 2.1, as Jude presented earlier, on the new features coming in, is that you can change the reward slot address. So over time, you can change the address to someone else, which means that would unlock this possibility of possibly tokenizing reward slots. And then, going beyond that, another thing that we've been looking at recently is whether, now that Taproot is there and whatnot, if we can use threshold signatures to maybe make that more interesting. So, because the main point is there's going to be Bitcoin that's going to be bridged. We don't want any given entity to control that, right? So we have custodial Bitcoin right now, custodial wrapped Bitcoin, and that's fine. It's fast. It works pretty well, and a lot of people are just happy with that. But there's also a group of people that want that non-custodial wrapped Bitcoin. And if we can crack that, we can figure that out, and bring that onto Stacks, then I think that will open up so much potential that we cannot even imagine what that's going to look like. And then bring in, some people that like cross-chain bridges. You can bridge these tokens. Would you, for the first time, actually have actual wrapped Bitcoin, on different chains? Stacks could possibly unlock all of that. So that's the thing I'm very interested and excited about, and we'll have to see if we can figure that out.
Yeah, I wish we had more time to discuss more on the TSS. That's very exciting to hear. And another very interesting thing that we're working at Hiro and as well as in Stacks ecosystem is a layer 2 solutioning via hyperchains that could bring blockchain Bitcoin to that feature parity in comparison to other blockchains. So again, thank you for joining me in this conversation and enlightening us. I hope you all
Thank you.
gleaned some information. Come find us. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll love to talk about it more. Thank you very much.